Amen. You guys can take a seat. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here, fired up for our first Elevate Night of Worship tonight at 6:30 at Colby Park. It's a great night. You won't want to miss it, and it's just going to be a good day. 2 years ago next week, something really awful happened in my life. Jenny gave birth to these two twin boys, and we went immediately from a family of 4 to a family of 6. Time out, I just got a bunch of dirty looks. That's not the bad thing. Hold your horses, I was getting to the bad thing. It's a terrible thing to say. I'm not the kind of person that would say that about my kids. It was awesome having the twins. If I'm honest, it was a really long day. It got kind of boring, but the end was pretty great. But then, right after we had the twins, and having the twins is related, that's why I told that part of the story. Right after we had the twins, the bad thing that happened was we canceled our DirecTV. And I loved that DirecTV. I didn't ever watch most of the channels, but I loved the History Channel, and I loved the Discovery Channel because Shark Week, and I loved ESPN, and ESPN2, and Fox Sports 1, and beIN Sport, and the Fox Soccer Channel, and I miss it. And I really love DirecTV, but we doubled our kids and halved our income in one fell swoop, so it had to go. And ever since then, and maybe some of you have had a similar experience, they call me every other month and ask me the same question. And apparently none of them ever leave notes for the next person, because every 2 months I get a call that says, hey, you were a DirecTV customer for a long time. Can I ask why you canceled? And then I explain it, and then the person says, oh, that sounds pretty reasonable. Okay, thanks for your time. And they hang up, except for the last time. The last guy who called me was either significantly more passionate about his job as a DirecTV telemarketer than your average DirecTV telemarketer, or he was just fired up that day, or he's tenacious, or he's new, and he just didn't understand how it works. But he asked me, and I told him the story, and he's like, yeah, well, I gotta tell you, though. I gotta tell you about this deal anyway. Can I just tell you the deal? And I wanted to be nice, so I was like, yeah, tell me the deal. Tell me the deal. And so he gets to the end, and he laid out the whole thing and the price structure, and he's like, isn't that just such an awesome deal? I'm excited to get you hooked back up. What's a day that works for me to send someone out there to hook you back up to DirecTV? And I told him, oh, it does sound awesome, but no thanks. And as I was about to hang up, he said, sir, wait. I gotta be honest. I just cannot in good conscience let you hang up the phone right now, because this deal that I've been authorized to offer you, it's just so good. I know it's a money thing for you, but I just think you can't afford not to take it. And I said, wait a minute. So you're telling me this isn't spending $50 a month, this is investing $50 a month. And he said, exactly. And I told him, that's a good sales pitch, but no. But it got me thinking, right? It got me thinking about like the idea that there might be things in this life that cost something, that require us to pay a price of some sort that we really can't afford not to pay because they're so awesome. There might be things in this world that are so worth the cost, no matter what the cost might be, that we should just sign up, and I'm convinced that DirecTV is not one of those things, but that Jesus is. Okay, and I know that's a really corny pastor thing to say, and I'm sorry for being that guy, okay? But as corny as it is for me to say it, I say that Jesus is worth the cost no matter what the cost, because I don't believe that all the time every one of us is convinced of that. I think so often, so many of us and so many people in our world walk around and we do life and we do faith with one of two ideas in our head. We either do it with this belief that Christianity, that following after Jesus is going to be really simple and really easy, and it's never ever going to cost us anything, or at least it shouldn't cost us anything, and if it ever does and it ever gets hard, then God must be doing it wrong and we can get really mad at him. Or we walk around with this idea that whatever it costs us to follow Jesus is just a little less worth it than following the world. That the price is just a little bit too high, because what the world has to offer us is just maybe a little bit better and a little bit different, and we want it just a little bit more than we want the vision that Jesus has cast for what it looks like to be one of his followers. And as we continue this Catalyst series here at Vision this morning, my hope and my prayer is that all of us would walk out of here with a better picture of just exactly what it is that Jesus is inviting us into when he invites us to be his followers. And my hope and prayer is that every one of us would walk out of here convinced to the core that we can't afford not to follow Jesus. You know, during his time here on earth, Jesus invited all sorts of misbehaviors and unbelievers to follow him. Everybody's invited in. You are invited to follow him, but there's something that you need to know about following Jesus. It will cost you something eventually. It may cost you money, it may cost you career advancement, it may cost you a relationship, it may cost you popularity, but check it out. In the moment when it costs you something to chase after Jesus instead of chasing after the world, you will learn something profound about yourself. You will discover whether you're a consumer or a catalyst in this whole Jesus movement, and you can only be one. You'll discover whether you're in it just for the quick, easy thing that you can get out of it, like, oh man, I just showed up for the miracles. I'm not in it for anything else. Or whether this vision that Jesus has for your life to be a change agent in the place that you are and in the lives of the people around you, whether that vision has permeated your soul. I'm going to be honest, for some of us this morning, and for a lot of people sitting in churches all around the world today, this idea that following Jesus has to cost us something, that it's not simple and easy, that sometimes there's a price to be paid, is really uncomfortable. And for some of us, maybe even it's new. Like, sadly, there are so many places in the world and so many churches that just teach the whole, like, hey, show up, just pray the prayer, and then everything's going to be perfect, and everything's going to be wonderful. God's going to bless your socks off every day, and it's never going to be hard. You can have your best life right now, and everything you ever wanted right here, right now, just have it. And so a lot of us have this idea that it's never going to be difficult, and when things get difficult, we get bitter and we bail because we've been misinformed and we've been misled, and I don't want to mislead us, and I don't want to lead us poorly. It's awesome to follow Jesus. Everything about your life is better. You're going to be a better husband, a better wife, a better daughter, a better son, a better friend, a better employee, a better neighbor. You're going to love more and be more generous. Everything is better when you follow Jesus. It's the most amazing thing in the world, and it gives you a glorious hope for the future, but there's a cost to being a catalyst in a messed up world that needs to change but doesn't want to. There's a cost to being a catalyst in a messed up world that needs to change but doesn't always want to. Last week we dug into Matthew chapter 16, the story of Jesus and his disciples at Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus asked them, who do people say that I am? And then Peter, of all people, miraculously, and it was miraculously because God gave him the answer, Peter gets it right. And he says, you're the Christ, you're the Messiah, you're the anointed one that we've been waiting for. And side note, like some of us grew up thinking Christ was Jesus' last name, you know, like Wally Jackson, Jesus Christ. And some of us maybe still think that, and it's not. Like, how would you know if the pastor didn't tell you? Like, Christ is this word in Greek that means anointed one, which means the same thing as Hebrew in the Old Testament as the word Messiah. So Christ and Messiah mean anointed one, this one that Jesus promised from the very beginning to Adam and Eve, the one who is coming to save us. And Peter says, you're that one. You're the Messiah. You're the Christ. You're the one who came to save us. And Jesus says, yep. And then he starts casting this vision for him, casting this vision for his disciples of this thing that he's building that he named the church. And he tells them that he's gathering this community together. This community is going to be a catalyst, a force for change in the world, and that all the evil of the world can't prevail against it, that the gates of hell will not prevail against it, that it's going to light up the darkness of the world. And the big idea of this message that Jesus is giving his disciples when he paints a picture of them, the first picture that he ever painted of the church is this, like that as a church, and for us, like as a local church in Des Moines, we're a catalytic force with the ability to bring change right here, right now, to the things in our world, in our city that are broken. And right after this story, right after this picture of church, Matthew tells another story. And Luke and Mark in their Gospels tell this same story right afterwards. And if you know the Gospels, again, you know that that doesn't always happen. The chronology isn't always the same because in the first century, writers wrote nonfiction thematically rather than chronologically, as ridiculous as that is in our brains. And so they don't always stack it together. But all three of these guys stack these two stories together because they're saying, these go together. It's important to understand them together. So right after Jesus paints this picture of what the church is going to be, he says this to the disciples. If you have your Bibles or you have your Bibles, you can crack them open to Matthew chapter 16, or you can follow along on the screen. If you don't have a Bible, grab them from the Next Steps table on your way out. We'd love to give you one. But Jesus, starting in verse 21 of Matthew 16, is talking to his disciples, and he's talking to the crowds that are following him. And right after, he's had this moment where the disciples discover definitively that he is the Messiah, the one promised to save them. Right after he tells them about the church, he tells them this. Okay, and the stuff that he said about the church is a pretty great sales pitch. Like, it's a pretty awesome vision. Like, I'm going to invite you guys into this thing that I'm building. It's going to change the world. Nothing, not evil, not darkness, not hatred, nothing, not even the gates of hell is going to prevail against it. And like any good salesman, Jesus gives them the awesome pitch, and then he gives them the fine print. okay? And this is stuff, the stuff we're going to read today is the stuff that they say really fast at the end of commercials, okay? Like, do you have heartburn? This awesome new super pill might cure your heartburn. Studies have shown side effects include diarrhea, vomiting, and sudden death in no less than 50% of people. And you hear, they're like, what? I'll do the heartburn. I don't know what that guy just said. That doesn't sound fun. Like, this stuff Jesus is about to say is that stuff, okay? It's the sudden death in 50% of people type stuff that they gloss over. And what he's saying is like, check it out, the church is going to change the world. Asterisk, it's not going to be easy. Okay, which one shouldn't be shocking. Like, that makes a lot of sense, that changing the world isn't going to be easy. And two, Jesus doesn't gloss over it. He doesn't say it fast. He doesn't try and sneak it in so that we don't hear it and we don't fully understand. He lays it out really clearly because he wants us to know what it is that he's inviting us into. Okay, so starting in verse 21, Jesus says this. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. So Jesus starts telling these guys about what the future holds. He gives them a glimpse of the mission, and they're expecting at first this picture of like glory and triumph, because their whole lives, that's what they thought the Messiah was going to be. They thought this Savior was going to be the guy that saved them from Rome and that fought the war and that won it and that got them political power. And Jesus tells them about the church and the gates of hell. And then he says, okay, and this is what's going to happen. And they're excited. And then instead of telling them about triumph and glory, he tells them about suffering, about death, sacrifice, about a heavy price that has to be paid. And Peter, he just had this amazing moment. He decides, oh man, Jesus is going off the deep end. I got to go calm this dude down. And he comes out, he's like, oh, bro, things are going pretty good right now. Like, the people like us. They like us, and you're saying weird stuff. The people like me. It's kind of fun. This is going really good when you're talking about the stuff they want to hear, like the peace and love stuff. And now you're just talking about death, buddy. That's freaky, okay? That's weird, and it's not going to happen. I don't want you to, he's rubbing Jesus' back right now. He's like, don't worry, dude, you're worrying. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get killed. Remember that one time we were in the boat, and the waves were crazy, and then you told the wind to shut up, and it did? Nature obeys you. They're not going to kill you, man. You got to calm down. Cool out, Jesus. You're starting to scare the people. And if you just go back and you tell them more of the, like, you feed them again and do the peace stuff, they're going to like you. And then Jesus, he hears that and he understands Peter's heart. And so he really calmly and really gently looks at Peter and he says, get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me, and you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Burn. Like, that hurts. Peter is coming off the greatest moment of his life. And a couple minutes later, he gets called Satan. Like, this is Peter. And it's crazy because the other disciples are cracking up because for those few minutes, they started to wonder if maybe Peter wasn't really an idiot, but now he's back, okay? And he's back and they're like, oh, my, Peter. And what Jesus is saying is something really profound to Peter. It's a big verse for us to understand. Because he's looking at Peter, he says, I know it's been cool so far. I know it's been easy so far. It's been fun to see the crowds and to be a part of this movement. And it's been really great and really easy so far. But your approach to this, like the lens through which you're viewing me and this movement and what I've invited you into, you have this consumerist approach. I mean, your concern when I start talking about death and suffering, it isn't even so much about what's going to happen to me. It's about what's going to happen to you because of what happens to me. And Jesus is pretty harsh. Like, Jesus calling you Satan, that's about the worst, okay? And he's pretty harsh with Peter for a reason, because he wants Peter to know. And he wants us to know that the functional question of following him can't just be, well, what am I going to get out of it? What am I going to get out of it? What am I going to get out of it? He wants to shift the lens. Because he tells us, like, there's this human concern, this consumerist lens that we look through that asks, what am I going to get? But I want to shift the lens for you, Peter, to this godly concern, which is the catalytic lens that says, what was I made to give? And he makes that clear right afterward. This is the fine print section. Verse 24. Then Jesus said to the disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. He says, if you want to be a part of this thing, if you want to be a catalyst and not just a consumer, if you want to live the life that I designed you for, if you want to be part of this amazing purpose that I'm inviting you into, then you got to deny yourself and you got to take up your cross. That's what it looks like. And denying yourself is maybe the easier of the two, or at least like the more relatable, because we're used to that. Like denying myself just means saying no to me, and we do that pretty regularly. Maybe begrudgingly, but we do it regularly. Like when the waiter comes over and says, do we want dessert tonight? And you say no, and that's kind of a lie because deep down you really want dessert, but you know you shouldn't eat it. And so you just deny yourself and say no. Like we deny ourselves pretty regularly, and Jesus is saying, if you want to follow me, if you want to be a catalyst in this world, you got to deny yourself. And what he's trying to help us understand is this, like if you want to be a catalyst rather than just a consumer, there are going to be times in your life where what you want for you and what Jesus wants for you are not the same. And what are you going to do in those moments? Are you going to deny yourself or are you going to deny Jesus? Or are you going to be like most of us and try and get real clever and compromise and deny both of you a little bit? Like, I want bacon really, really bad. I just want it. But Jesus wants me to eat salad. Eureka, I've got it. Boom. This is the solution. This is not workable in the world of Jesus. This is not the idea that Jesus has when he says deny yourself and take up your cross. He says if you want to follow, you got to deny yourself all the way. There is no bacon salad. That's not a thing. Okay? He says deny yourself and take up your cross. And that one is just way scarier. There's no way around it. Like it's a big, massively, unbelievably huge ask that Jesus has when he asks us to take up our cross. I think it's hard for us, like in our culture, a couple thousand years later, to feel the full weight of that phrase, take up your cross, that the original listeners would have heard when Jesus said it. Because when we hear cross, we think jewelry or we think decorations, or we may even think of some movie scene that we saw with really dramatic music playing in the background. But Jesus' followers, when they heard cross, thought of the people they knew that had died on one. They had walked by rotting bodies on crosses their whole life because Rome tended to leave them there for a while to scare people into obedience. I mean, make no mistake, when they heard the word cross, it meant death. And like a horrible, painful, degrading death at that. Like not only was the cross one of the most torturous methods of execution that's ever been invented in the history of humanity, it was the most degrading. You got hung up naked for everyone to see, and you had to carry your own cross to the place that you would be hung upon it. I mean, the modern day equivalent is like giving a death row inmate the lethal injection needle and making them carry it to the injection chamber. Or like back in the day, making someone carry the noose that was going to hang him, or carry the guns that the firing squad was going to use to shoot her. It's almost unthinkable that the Romans would make someone carry their own cross to the point of their own execution, but it had a purpose. Rome did it on purpose. It was Rome's way of saying, you may have rebelled against the state, and you may have broken our laws, but you will submit to us. You will die. And not only that, but you will help us kill you. Carrying your own cross was the ultimate submission. Submission to the highest degree, meant as a public show so that other people would submit as well. And ultimately it meant death. And that's the image that Jesus gives for following him. That's the phrase that he chooses when he describes what it's going to look like if we want to embrace this vision and be a catalytic force in the world. That's what Jesus tells the crowd of people around him they got to do if they want to follow him. Nothing less. And it freaks everybody out. Like the disciples are freaked out. It freaked out Peter when he started talking about his own death. And then he tells them to take up their own cross. And it freaked people out. Jesus knew that. He knew their hearts. He knows ours too. Yours and mine. And you know what? Some of the people left. Like they heard this whole like deny yourself, take up your cross thing. And they walked. They bailed. And some of us do too. Some of us hear that and we just think, that's too high a price. Like that's a hefty, hefty price to pay. Because like, what if the world has something really great that I'll miss out on if I pay that price and I follow Jesus? What if there's something really cool that I won't get to experience in the world if I deny myself or if I take up my cross? And so some of us just walk away. I mean, that may be some of you, the reason that you walked away from church a long time ago, and maybe you haven't been back in a really long time because you decided, man, that's just too much of a price to pay. Maybe I'll do the bacon salad thing, and I'll kind of follow Jesus. I just want to chase the world a little. Not in like some crazy debauched way, but I just want to chase it a little bit just for a little while. And maybe later in life, like when I'm old, I'll do the Jesus thing. When I don't have so much ahead of me, so much to lose, when it won't cost me so much. The stakes are just too high. It's not that I don't believe. It's just that I don't know that I want to pay that price. And you know what? That's logical thinking. It makes sense. I understand how we get to the point where we think that. And a lot of people do. But this is what Jesus has to say about it. And it's one of the most incredible, profound teachings that Jesus has for us in the entire Bible. One of the most incredible, profound, life-changing things you'll ever hear. In verses 25 through 27, Jesus says this: "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with the angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they've done. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it." That's a pretty basic truth, but also a pretty deep one. Jesus is saying you can do everything in your power to stay alive, but you won't. It doesn't work like that. Like eventually, no matter how hard you try, you're going to die. You're going to lose this valuable thing that you've been clinging to. And Jesus looks at his followers, he looks at his disciples and said, this thing that you're holding on to that you consider life, whether it's life itself or whether it's a relationship or whether it's a job or a career or something else, this thing that you consider life, if you lose it for me, you're going to gain something even better. It's going to feel like death, but you're going to gain life in it. Whoever loses that thing that they consider life because they're following me is going to gain everything. And you know what? You're going to lose that stuff eventually anyway. You cannot keep it. You cannot live. That's just the way the world works. And you're going to discover that what seemed like a loss at the time brought life. And it's with that reality in mind, that frame of reference, that Jesus asked him this question: what good is it for you if you gain the whole world, but you forfeit your soul? Like, weigh it out. Because he's looking at me, he says, I know some of you are worried. And the truth is, some of us in this room right now are worried. We're worried that if we weigh it out, Jesus isn't worth it. We're worried about what we'd have to give up if we really want to be the catalytic force that Jesus is asking us to be. If we really want to bring change to a world where it's hard to change. We're worried. And Jesus says, cool, weigh it out. I know you're worried, and I know you're thinking maybe you'll miss out on something, but put it all on the scales. If you put everything that the world has to offer you on one side, whatever it is that you want, whether it's money or power or stuff or fame or sex or a great job or a cool house or an amazing car, whatever it was, if you put it all on one side and you put your soul on the other side, which one is worth more to you? And he asks us, what if you get to the end of the thing? What if you get to the end of a life? This incredible, great life on earth where you had everything the world could ever offer you, and it was everything you ever wanted, and you figure out at the end that life with everything in the world cost you your chance at eternity. In that moment, what would you trade for eternity? Everything. You trade everything. And guess what? You're going to lose everything anyway. You're going to lose it anyway. When Jesus frames it that way, it helps us realize something, gives us this raw understanding that those scales look pretty unbalanced at the end of the day, because most of us come to the point where we take a look at that, we take a look at eternity and what God is offering us in this purpose and this plan that he has for our lives, and we come to the point where we say, my soul is more valuable to me than my stuff. My soul is worth more than my stuff. And if that's true, then we got to deny ourselves and we got to take up our cross, because that's what Jesus says it looks like to follow him in the world. That's what he says it means to be his follower. And I want us to understand something before we go too far down that road. Salvation is free. It's free. Jesus did it all. He paid the whole price on the cross. There's absolutely nothing that we can do to earn it. All we got to do is believe in it. Salvation is free. It's free. It's free. Salvation costs nothing, but following Jesus will eventually cost you something. Because Jesus said following him means total and complete submission to him. It means giving up our rebellion and our sin and the stuff in the world that tempts us to chase after. It means giving up our right to be the boss of our own lives. It means going where he says to go and doing what he asks us to do, no matter what the cost. And ultimately, for all of us, at some point, that cost will be our life. It'll be that stuff that we cling to, that we believe is the most important, that makes up our life, because that's what Jesus is calling us to. There's a pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany at the time of the Nazis, and he actively resisted them, preached the gospel during World War II, and eventually he was arrested and thrown into a concentration camp where he was killed. And you guys who've been around have heard me quote him before, and there's very few pastors and theologians who have shaped me the way that Bonhoeffer has. I encourage you to read him. But while he was in the concentration camp, he wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship. And it includes these powerful words about how grace is costly and not cheap or easy. Bonhoeffer writes, "When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. And it's grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It's costly because it costs a man his life, and it's grace because it gives a man the only true life. It's costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son. Ye were bought at a price, and what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life, but delivered him up for us." I love that section of the book, and I love it particularly because I think Bonhoeffer sees something in Jesus' call to take up our cross daily that a lot of us miss. Because like this Matthew 16 section is not everybody's favorite section. Like we like a lot of other parts. We don't love the deny yourself and follow me and Jesus talking about death. Like I kind of like living. I kind of like the things that I have, and I'm not, surrender doesn't sound quite as fun. But Bonhoeffer sees something in that. He says when Christ calls him in, he bids him come and die, and Jesus does. He's not making any bones about it when he says take up your cross, right? But Jesus calling us to die to something we cannot keep, to gain something we cannot lose. He's telling us that thing that feels like death to give up, that sacrifice that feels like a loss to you now. It's grace and it's a win. It's costly because it costs you your life, but it's grace because it gives you the life worth living, the life that God created you for, the purpose that he's inviting you to live into, to be a change agent in this world. The call to die to something worth nothing, to gain something worth everything. Because when we do it, we follow in the footsteps of Jesus, and his death was the death that defeated death. And in the same way, check it out, when we die to ourselves, when we deny ourselves, we say, all right, Jesus, as scary as it is and as crazy as it feels, I'm in on this Jesus movement. I am all in. I want to be the catalyst that you created me to be. Our death, just like Jesus' death, it defeats death and it brings life. It brings life to ourselves and to the people around us and to our city. After I graduated college, I spent a year working as a security guard in a high school, waiting for Jenny to graduate so that I could go to grad school and she could be my sugar mama. And it worked out great. The school that I worked at was a little bit on the rougher side of things. It had about 1,100 students with 4 security guards and 1 on-duty police officer at all times. And so, needless to say, in a school that requires 5 officers of the peace of some variety, I got to break up some fights over the course of the year, and it was kind of fun. But I remember one in particular. There was these 2 kids sitting out in front of the school, and a truck pulled up, and 2 guys hopped out and just started beating the tar out of these 2 kids. And they've been going for a while when we got the call, and we came running, and the guys hopped back in the truck and sped away. And I know some of you are looking at me thinking, I don't think it would be that scary to see you running. And it's important to understand that the other 3 security guards were 6'7", 6'6", and a 6'2" former college football player, and I was like the little white one. So when we came running, it was scary, okay? But they hopped in the truck, and I will never forget the image that I saw, because I looked at 2 kids sitting on a bench outside of school, and they were bloody, and they were beaten. And I started to wonder, about those 2 kids and about all the kids in that school, so many of them who came from broken homes. I wondered, what does the future hold for those 2 kids? how's it going to go for them? As I sit there and I watched them bleed, I thought, probably not well. It's probably not going to go very well. And I wonder, where's the hope then? For these two bloody kids sitting on a bench outside the school, where is the hope for their future? What in the world can redirect it from the way that it's headed right now? Is there anything that can change it? Like, can the government do it? I doubt it. Given the presidential candidates that we have, it seems increasingly less likely. Like, can education do it? They just got the tar beaten out of them at school, so I doubt it. Like, can technology do it? No. The only thing that has the power to completely redirect the future of these kids' lives and every other kid in this school who's broken is some fired up follower of Jesus from some fired up church that believes that they're built to be a catalyst in the world and invites them in. Like, if their lives are going to change, they really need Jesus, and that's what our world needs. That's what Des Moines needs. Our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, our classmates, our family members. Des Moines needs Jesus followers who are willing to say, I am all in for this thing. I believe that Jesus built me and invited me to be a catalytic force. I'm going to do it no matter what the cost, because I can't afford not to follow Jesus. I'm embracing this vision. Des Moines needs people like that. Des Moines needs churches like that. It needs Revision to be one of them. It's not easy to light up a darkness that wants to stay dark. It's not easy to change a world that doesn't want to change. But there is pain and brokenness and hurt and frustration and evil all around us. And people in our city are lost and they're lonely because they don't know Jesus and they've never been welcomed into the loving community that he named the church. And if we're willing to deny ourselves and to take up our cross daily, there are going to be times where what we want for ourselves and what Jesus wants for us are not the same, where they come into conflict, and it's going to feel in those moments like a death for us to move toward Jesus and away from ourselves. But if we choose to embrace this catalytic vision that he has for us as individuals and for us as a community here at Revision Church, if we're willing to say yes to Jesus and no to ourselves, what we're going to find is something richer than we possibly could have imagined. Because when you say no to you and yes to Jesus, you discover something that you cannot possibly discover in any other space and in any other way. You will discover not just who you are, but whose you are. And when you look in the mirror and you know that, it changes everything. It changes everything for you, it changes everything for the people around you, and it changes everything for our city. Because God's plan to bring hope and healing and restoration and the gospel here and now is us. His plan is the church. We are the church. It's our time. It's our time. And if we don't do it, if we decide that the price to be paid is too high, that we'd rather be a consumer than a catalyst, if we don't want to pay it, what happens then? You know, the crowd that Jesus was talking to this day when he talked about denying ourselves and taking up our cross, there were a lot of people who heard it and they walked away. They felt like that price is just too high. I'm out. And you know what happened to all those people that walked away? Me either. But I'm willing to bet that on the other side of the resurrection, when the entire city of Jerusalem was buzzing because of the risen Jesus, they would have given anything and everything to be able to go back and follow. Being a catalyst for Jesus will cost you something, but not being a catalyst for Jesus will cost you so much more. And it won't just cost you, it'll cost us. It'll cost Des Moines. Because nothing will change. The hurting people around us will go on hurting. The lost people around us will not be found. The darkness around us will become even deeper in a night already devoid of stars. And the last reservoirs of hope will dry up inside of us and inside of the people around us. If we decide to chase the world, we make little of the cross. We make little of the freedom that Jesus' death and his resurrection offered us. We make little of the purpose that he invited us into to be a catalytic force for change in the world. But if we make much of it, if we believe, if we fearlessly walk out, deny ourselves, take up our crosses, if we follow the example of Jesus and die so that we can live, then the people around us will live as well. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for inviting us into this ridiculously cool purpose of being change agents, being future creators in a world that that just needs to change and is so desperate for hope, but sometimes doesn't know it. And Jesus, we know that you told us it won't be easy. So we walk out with open eyes to the fact that at some point what you're asking of us and what we want for ourselves is going to come into conflict. And Lord, we just pray that you give us the fire in our souls to deny ourselves and to not just be consumers in this Jesus movement, but to say, I will be a catalytic force because it's a price that I can't afford not to pay, because Jesus, I can't afford not to follow. Lord, we just thank you for the chance that you've given us here, now, in this place, in this city, as Revision Church, to help heal up the brokenness and make a difference in the world around us and point them towards you. We just pray that you'd light us up, that we'd be a catalyst in this place. Amen.